heartfelt.
I'm going to try the experiment just for one introduction, because my voice, as you can see, is strong. For the next role, it will be the prepared speeches starting with Bob Avallone's speech, but the speech objectives introduced by Dinesh Chimanamata. Would you please introduce the objectives for Bob, please?
Yes, Brandon. The title of this speech, which is missing from this the agenda, is Capital Punishment Revisited. Interesting topic. And the objectives are, this is the speech number 4, project number 4, speaking to inform. And the objectives are, prepare a report on a situation, event, or a problem of interest to the audience. Deliver sufficient factual information in your report so the audience can make a valid conclusion or a sound decision. Answer questions from the audience. The speech itself is 5 to 7 minutes and 2 to 3 minutes for the questions after the speech.
Okay, so again, the title is Capital Punishment Revisited. Please welcome Bob. The option of the microphone, or
I'll just use the mic, given that people have complained about my softness of my voice. Actually, last summer, the Pope came out with a new edict, a new Catholic edict, that capital punishment is immoral and unjust in all cases, and I guess that means if you're a Catholic, you shouldn't be supporting it. I'm not. I was once a practicing Catholic, I'm not anymore, but this incident brought me back over 50 years ago to when I was in high school. I went to a Catholic high school and most of our teachers were diocesan priests. There's one particular priest, and I'm not sure what the class was, I think it was social studies. We talked about capital punishment. He was in favor, and he was very vociferous in his opinion that it was the right thing to do, was to have capital punishment. And then he turned around and said, now you students need to write an essay given your opinion. And as you might have guessed, most of the students agreed with him. It seemed to be the politically smart thing to do, was to agree with the teacher. I dissented, and I said, I don't believe I examined the facts. And maybe for the first time that I had an opinion on it, I said, this is not right. And only me and one other student disagreed with the professor. But it gave me the idea for my next speech that I should revisit the topic and talk about it again and see if I still feel the same way. So I'm going to go over some of the issues and really look at both the pros and cons of the different topics. The first one is the morality of it. Is it right to execute somebody? Isn't that just bringing us down to the level of the person that they committed murder, now we're killing somebody? The other side of that is, well, it was such a heinous crime that perhaps we should execute them because it's a just thing, eye for an eye, so to speak. So that'll be the pro side of it. Now there's the next argument, will be the constitutionality of it. Is it constitutional? Well, it's right in the Constitution. At that time it was fairly common, so you can't argue that it's unconstitutional. The one argument I think the cons have is it's perhaps today an unusual punishment. It says the Constitution, cruel and unusual. Unusual means not often done, and there are very few. I believe there was like 50 executions last year. I think Texas is actually the highest state. They had like more than anyone else. And now deterrence is, to me, the biggest factor. Does it deter crime? Does it deter murder? That would be an argument that would convince me that it's worthy of doing to save the lives of innocent people. But in fact, the statistics show that the states that have capital punishment, actually they have a higher murder rate per capita than the states that don't have it. So it has improved one way or the other, but there's certainly no evidence that it's a deterrent. The next issue, people often bring up the idea of mistakes. What happens if you execute somebody that is innocent? That could happen, and we found out with the new DNA testing that a lot of people on death row were exonerated with the DNA evidence, and it has been shown that after the fact, people that have been executed are now shown to be innocent. The counter-argument would be, well, now that we have the DNA testing, we can do a better job of preventing the innocent from being executed, and there'd be fewer mistakes. It's always going to be, never going to be perfect. There always going to be some mistakes. The next issue, the cost of it, and this is kind of interesting because you would think that it would be cheaper to just execute somebody than to have them sitting in prison for 40, 50 years and having to feed them and having to take up space. But in fact, the opposite proves to be true. With all the extra appeals and the time it takes to finally execute somebody, and the having a separate death row and having the paraphernalia, and to have to get all that, it turns out to be cheaper to just put somebody in the prison population with everybody else. The issue of the race, are whites more likely to be executed than blacks and other minorities has been. Whites, by statistics that I've seen, whites are the majority of people executed, but minorities are more likely per capita to be executed. And certainly that brings up the case of the income. If you're having much of a good income, you can afford a high-priced lawyer. O.J. Simpson comes to mind. If you don't have a good lawyer, you have to take a public defender, who some of them do a good job, but they're usually overworked and don't have much time. So you're more likely to be executed if you're a person of a low income. The next issue I want to talk about is closure and the feeling of the victim's family. Do they somehow feel that the executing of the person that killed their loved one brings them some kind of satisfaction? And that is a good argument for the pro. The counter argument is that just vengeance. So we want to have a society of vengeance, and an eye for an eye, and that's the way we want our society to be. I think of one particular case, that poor little boy Martin Richard, who got killed in the Patriots Day bombing. His family was they came out against the death penalty, and they didn't want the death penalty for the surviving terrorists. But he was sentenced to death anyway, so he's awaiting, I believe he hasn't been executed yet. We're wrapping up now, but another issue is nowadays with the way we do executions nowadays, lethal injection. Physicians, you have to have somebody to set that up, and there's been a lot of resistance because physicians are supposed to help people and not kill them. So they're not supposed to participate in that. We talked about the attorneys. I think I'm about done with my prepared remarks. So we've got 2 or 3 minutes for questions. So if the timer will start over and give me 2 to 3 minutes, if anyone has any questions or comments that they want to raise, we can do that. Okay. Peter.
If we're human, then there will always be mistakes made, and there will always be a situation where people who are innocent are executed. How can one justify? To me, I've always felt that executing one person means so much, which is so horrible, means I'd much rather have other people not be. The reverse of that. How can we ever justify it if we'll always be executing innocent people?
You can never get the mistake down to 0. You can reduce it. And I think the counter argument would be, well, people can be in prison and they be in prison incorrectly, and you'll be putting me in prison. But if you're in prison incorrectly and they discover 10 years later that you were innocent, at least you can then get out and have part of your life versus once you're executed, you're gone. There's no way to bring you back. So to me, that's a good argument. That's why I meant to, I did forget one thing in my opening statement, that as a result of my re-examining, I still feel the same way that capital punishment is wrong in all cases, and I would like to see it abolished in every case. I would, as a state legislator or member of Congress, I would vote to have it. Rob,
Fantastic report, Bob.
thank you.
My question is a personal one.
Uh,
How did you find the courage and the clarity as a young person to dissent against the fantastic peer pressure wave in your classroom? Was it like a gut feeling? Is it something you just made up yourself? Was it the training of your parents? I really admire what you did as a young person. Would you mind
You
sharing
know,
that with us?
I'll address that as best I can. It's just my personality, and some people look at it as a good trait. Some people look at it as a flaw. That I will go against the grain. I won't go along with the majority if I feel differently. Now, as it turned out, there were only two of us, and the other one of the two, he was a lot more vociferous in arguing with the professor, the teacher. But I did want to report that I was worried about getting a bad mark because they disagreed with him, and that didn't happen. He gave me, as I remember, I think I got a B or something. I got a decent amount, so it didn't hurt my grades to disagree with him. I think there's time for one more question, and we can wrap it up if there is one. The next.
There is, you talked about physicians and pharma companies not participating in developing
Right.
the lethal injection, right? I know I did quite a bit of reading a long time ago, and you can understand why physicians and the pharma companies don't want to be blamed for obvious reasons against being not being pro-life and things like this. This is not an idea, this may go, there are so many controversies about the drugs being used, whether the patients are feeling it and all that stuff. Do you have any thoughts about what's going to be a better solution to this?
I think my time is up, so we can talk about that offline later.
Okay, sure.
Go back to